welcome to Transmission. Today I'm talking with Eric Grill, CEO of Coin Outlet. Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So Coin Outlet has Bitcoin ATMs. How did you get into building ATMs?
Well, I didn't intend to get into building Bitcoin ATMs. I originally got into the Bitcoin space looking at, I was in the financial services hedge fund industry, and I looked at Bitcoin as being able to create derivatives. It was not until really I went to the Miami Bitcoin conference that I saw nobody was building the infrastructure. And we know how the gold rush was. Everybody who made money was the shovels and building the infrastructure pieces. And so I thought, well, this is an opportunity that not only at that time there was RoboCoin, which I didn't like the way they were operating, and then there was Lamasu, which wasn't really operating in the United States because of our regulatory or lack of regulatory. So that's what got me into building the ATMs. I thought, hey, I can do that. I've been a programmer 25 years. The hardware shouldn't be too difficult to figure out. So I hired a compliance officer, and that was our first hurdle, was how do we get through the compliance here in the United States? Because at that time, we really didn't have that much guidance at all, and had no idea what was going to happen. But I knew that if we could operate here in the United States, that other countries would view that and be like, oh, if you're operating there, then it's fine here. There's nobody going to have a more strict regulatory regime than we have here.
Okay, great. Well, that's definitely true. I guess if you get US down, then you've got a lot of other countries ready to go. How do you deal with, KYC and AML in regards to your ATMs, and are your ATMs two-way with buying and selling options?
Yes, they're two-way. We have buy and sell. We have a recycler, so a lot of the buy side we can then turn around and dispense that cash. The AML KYC, we follow the guidance from FinCEN for the $3,000 limit of Know Your Customer. We've lowered it to $2,000, and in some locations we may lower that even further. And so we ask for ID at that point and identify who the user is. We use a third party to run them through the different various databases.
Okay, so that means if I buy more than 2,000 in a day, then I'm going to have to ID myself, basically, right?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
But if I went there at once a day and got $1,900 worth of Bitcoin, then I could probably get around IDing myself, I guess, right?
No, we would identify that. That's unusual. Most transactions are a couple $100. So the people that are really doing, first of all, $1,900 if you kept doing that in itself would be suspicious, right? That's considered structuring. You're trying to get around providing ID. So yeah, we would hit that pretty fast.
Okay, great. Of course. Okay, yeah, sure. But a lot of people have, that idea that, I'll just go there. Yeah, that's a pop. I'm sure you get all this.
We've talked to them and explained to them. Yes.
Yeah.
We've talked to them and explained to them how it works, and if they want to continue to, purchase that limit, that we need to know what they're doing.
Okay, great. Can you give us any information in regards to volume of buying and selling from your machines? Because it's really interesting to get information about the over-the-counter market in Bitcoin. I mean, you can get some statistics from local Bitcoins if the people do use the service there. But besides that, there's not really a whole lot of data. And it would be interesting just to hear what you can tell us. I know you can't tell us, exactly for each location or anything like that. But right. How is the volume?
Very, very good. I mean, we're doing very well there. We're not doing very much on the sell side. Frankly, people aren't selling us their Bitcoins, even though we don't charge any fee. And in fact, we've given them a premium at some point. We haven't had very much luck in getting people to give up their Bitcoins for cash. The majority, I'd say well over 90% are on the buy side of buying Bitcoin. And so there's a couple of locations where we've been a little bit more successful in getting people to sell us their Bitcoins, but it's a struggle here in the United States at least.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. So there's a lot of buy pressure.
Yes.
Have you ever noticed a spike in volume during some kind of crisis or news event? Like, recently in Europe, there was the so-called crisis, and, maybe there were some other news events. Have you noticed any spikes during something like that?
Yeah, I don't think we noticed anything. I was in Greece when they were having the crisis. I actually flew over there, but we didn't notice anything in the United States. I don't think most people noticed what was going on. I mean, the price of Bitcoin changed, but I don't think we noticed anything as far as more people using the machines. The only real incident that I guess we noticed a change would be the riots in Baltimore. We had a machine in Baltimore at a bar, and we had to empty it out 3 times a day. People were literally just coming in with cash and putting it in there. They didn't want to have any cash, which causes problems at the bar. They weren't comfortable with all the people coming in with all that money. They then became a target, and so that was the end of that. Very shortly thereafter, we moved the machine from there.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Why do you think people were, they didn't want to have cash because they thought it might get stolen, or they wanted to get the funds out of Baltimore? Why do you think that people
I think they wanted to get the fund. I think they wanted to get the funds out of Baltimore. It was curious. We didn't expect it. Frankly, we didn't think anybody would be using the machine at that time. And the person we had emptying the machine thought we were joking. He would literally leave there, and we'd have to call him back and say, "Hey, go back. It's filled again." Somebody's literally sitting in there waiting, and sometimes he would be in the bar, and there was literally somebody waiting in line, so it filled up. He'd have to take it out, and then he became a target. So it was not. We weren't prepared for that. We had no idea that would occur. So,
okay, that's interesting that people are using. Maybe we don't know exactly what they're using it for, but they might be using it for, a means of transfer. So that's another utility. It's pretty interesting.
Right. Well, they wanted to get. Some of the people did explain that they just weren't comfortable having cash in their house, and that they wanted to get out, and so that this was a mechanism for them to take their bitcoins and get out of town and not be carrying a large amount of cash. The police would stop them. A lot of people were complaining about the asset forfeiture, that if you have a large sum of cash, you get pulled over, they're going to take it from you. So we did hear some stories as to why they were doing it.
Okay, great.
We didn't expect that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't heard anything about that before. So,
yeah.
All right, and I was wondering, does Coin Outlet run a full node in-house to validate transactions that are made with the ATMs?
Yes, definitely. We have not only do we have full nodes, but we're also testing against other third parties. But we don't trust. I think the ethos of Bitcoin is not to trust anybody, so you should have something in house to verify that there's no collusion there.
Okay, great. Okay, well, going on to the topic of altcoins, is Coin Outlet planning on offering any other coins for sale on their ATMs? I mean, it should be easy enough just to add another field for Doge or Litecoin or whichever one.
We've done it. We put Litecoin and Dogecoin on the machine, and a couple of other coins, Mazacoin, we played around with putting on the machines. But it's not so much the technical problem; it's a user experience problem that people are already confused with Bitcoin. So if you start adding in other cryptocurrencies onto the machine, Litecoin is cheaper. Should I just buy the Litecoin? They don't understand that, so it just became very confusing, and we decided not to roll out any altcoins. But, in the future, if there's another coin that becomes, gets as much traction as Bitcoin, certainly we could put it on there, as well as other blockchain technologies. Frankly, we did a wedding on the machine, so there are other uses for the machine, and we certainly want to be a platform for providing that.
Okay, well, tell us about the wedding you did on the machine. Was that a kind of, you registered? Did put a hash of the wedding vows on the blockchain, or how did that work?
Yeah, that was we did that in Disney. Jeffrey Tucker officiated the wedding, and they had their private keys. They put it onto the blockchain, and then everyone could verify that they were married. Her family was in the Philippines watching, but they could also go onto the blockchain and say, "Hey, look, they're now married." So it was an experiment, and it was a lot of fun, actually.
Well, you can't undo, since the blockchain is immutable. I don't know what they're going to do if they want to get a divorce, but let's hope.
Well, then there's another entry, right? There's another entry to say we're getting divorced. That actually brought up those discussions of prenuptials, putting a prenuptial agreement on there, contracts and things like that you put on there. So yeah, I mean, right? Okay. Yeah, you're married forever until you undo it, right? Which you can't undo, so you got to put another entry on saying, okay, now we're divorced, so now you have to marry those two things up.
Sure. Well, yeah, right. You could just add another entry. It could be from the same address or something like that.
Well, as long
So
as they have that private key, they can prove that they were the people that initiated the wedding. They should be able to then go in and say, okay, we'd like to be divorced now, and do the same sort of thing without a third party mediating. Ideally,
okay,
right? I don't know if
right.
that'll work that way, but we'll
Well,
see.
yeah. Well, one day they're trying to dust off that old paper wallet with the private key or something, in
Right. Well,
the
I mean,
back.
and that's one of the reasons we thought about the prenuptials, right? So you get into the
Mm.
wedding, you put your prenuptials onto the agreement, so that if you undo that, then the prenup takes effect. But we don't have that in place yet to do any of that. That's
Okay, well
simply difficult.
that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I heard about that wedding on the blockchain.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. So, still on the topic of altcoins and blockchain technology, has Coin Outlet used Ripple or other platforms as a means of exchange of moving, funds around? And what coins or platforms do you think could be used for a way to move, fiat value and Bitcoin? Maybe, there's BitShares, NXT, New Bits. There are a whole lot of other things coming out now. So what's your guys' experience with these kind of technologies?
Well, we played around with Ripple for a while. As you know, here in the United States, it's difficult with banking to move money around. So we were looking at alternative ways to do that with custodial accounts and things like that, so we could move the money faster and the turnaround would be faster. Um, NXT we're actually using on the back end to as a reliable messaging service. So NXT is so cheap. Anytime you want to send a message, which you can encode information in, it only costs you one NXT to send it. So when people put $20 into the machine, that will make an entry on the NXT blockchain, and then when we fulfill that, we take the Bitcoin transaction, marry that up, and put another transaction on the NXT network with the transaction IDs, showing that there was fulfillment of that. And I guess we're using it as a side chain, so to speak. But one of the advantages of NXT, we were struggling around with reliable messaging. Communications is horrible in some of our locations, dropping internet connections and things like that. So if we're able to put it on the NXT blockchain, we're letting them take care of that and facilitate the transaction rather than us having to build all these mechanisms and redundancies and things like that. We had written it that way. We ripped all that out and are now using NXT as the backend messaging. We're using it for messaging, which is an interesting. It's an interesting way to use NXT, I think. The other, we looked at BitShares. We have looked at the other platforms. Frankly, there was just more done on NXT, and we looked at creating our own assets on there to facilitate moving the money around. So I think we're blockchain agnostic, so to speak. So we could move what we've done on NXT onto any other platform, fairly easily because we're not really utilizing anything specific to NXT.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's really interesting that you're actually using, an alternative cryptocurrency blockchain in order to move, structure your transactions and, just using another blockchain, kind of like as a side chain, as you said.
Yeah.
That's not
well, we can encode in the messages. We can encode all the information that we were sending, using WCF and different technologies to send the messages. We can encode all that into an NXT message. It's encrypted, and we don't have to worry about all that infrastructure. We've gotten rid of a lot of, we were using Windows Azure, Microsoft Azure for a lot of the storage, and we got rid of all that stuff. We don't need that anymore. We use the blockchain, another blockchain.
Yeah, great. And you didn't even have to, it's not a private blockchain or anything like that. It already exists and you just let them do it. Yep. And you're not using it really for the NXT currency. It's as a currency, you're just using it, for the utility, like you said, of, messaging basically.
Right. And I think actually one of the reasons I got interested in NXT and using it that way was somebody was asking me about a currency that they were going to provide on NXT. And so I started looking at NXT. I'd looked at it once before, and there wasn't that much built on it. And I saw that, hey, a lot has been built on this thing. It just clicked in my head, hey, we can do this. We can, instead of busting our heads with the reliable messaging here, we can use their platform, let them worry about it. And so far, so good. Yeah.
Okay, really interesting. I'm going to have to take a look now. you've got my interest. If you're doing it and you describe it as, able to function pretty well, then I think that's
it was interesting. Simple. It was actually surprisingly easy to do. Yep.
Great. Well, that's how it should be, right?
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Well, back to Bitcoin. We still have the block size limit discussion going on. What do you think about Bitcoin XT? Are you guys running an XT node? And What do you
No.
think about any of? Okay, and what do you? That's okay. It's just an interesting question. And what about
Yeah.
any of the other Bitcoin improvement proposals? And do you think that the sky is falling? We need to, raise the block size limit really soon, or do you think that this is just kind of, people are screaming that the sky is falling, but it's not?
I go back and forth on that. I don't think the sky is falling, no. I think initially I had some reservations about Bitcoin XT and how that would affect, and I didn't think it was such a great idea to go out and do your own thing and force the issue. But I may be backtracking on that now because I see now everyone's communicating and talking about it, and maybe that's what everyone needed. This is really, I think, the first time there's been a disagreement of this magnitude, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how people solve the problem. I do think Bitcoin will survive. I don't think this is the end of Bitcoin or the sky is falling or any of those problems. And I don't want to see it fork off or any of these other things. But if it brought about the discussion, I think that's a great thing. And I think they'll solve it. I think there's enough pressure on all these people now as developers. They need to solve this, that it will be solved.
Okay, great. All right. Well, tell us about, any projects that Coin Outlet is working on. I know you're looking to expand to some more countries outside of the United States. What countries are you already active in, and what kind of projects are you working on?
Sure. We put a machine into Amsterdam. When the Greek crisis happened and I went over there, we moved it from there into Greece. We operated it for a few days just to feel the water, see if people were interested. We got out there and spread the word. There is a lot of interest, obviously, for good reasons within the country. It's very difficult to operate in the country. There's a lot of rules that we were unprepared for when we got there. So we're not currently operating the machine there. It's sitting in storage. We have to go through the process of getting approved, so to speak. And once that happens, we plan on rolling out quite a few machines within Greece and the islands themselves. As far as the rest of Europe, we're also looking at other locations in Europe, specifically London. We want to go back into Amsterdam with a better infrastructure. I think it'd be better going in now, and frankly anywhere there. Latin America, I think Mexico will probably be we'll go in there sooner than later, and Brazil.
Okay, great. Really interesting. So Latin America, Greece, and rest of Europe are possible. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's about it for today. Do you have any closing statements, or how can I find out if there's a Coin Outlet ATM near my house?
Well, you can go to our website, coinoutletatm.com, or certainly the Coin Map and the various applications have us listed on there. Airbits has us on their application, so it's pretty easy to find where the ATMs are if they're operating. And we're going to be updating our website to actually show the status of the machines. We do have some locations that have network connectivity problems that bring the machines down. We're trying to solve those issues, but one of the complaints is that they spend a lot of time getting there, and we want to make sure that the machine's running when they get there. So we're going to solve those issues and be very transparent about it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot for coming on today, Eric.
Thanks, Theo.
Check out the links in the description. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, World Crypto Network. Thumbs up this video. Share the video. You can ask any questions or put your comments below. Thanks for watching. This was Transmission. See you next time.